Introduction. So good morning. This is the Good Fist class. Today is April 16th. Yes, April 16th. And we have a special visitor, a special guest today. Phil Boyle, maker of very fine keys from the UK, will be presenting in much the way that Northern California has boutique small batch wineries. I think of Phil as a boutique small batch key maker, and many of us have been enjoying his wines, keys, for some while now. So with that, Phil, I'll leave you as the pin person, and the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Bob. Well, good day, everyone. Thank you for your invitation to speak to you today. It's not an activity I'm generally used to, so I'll apologize in advance if it's a little rough around the edges. If there's any questions, could we leave them to the end, please, gents? There'll be plenty of time, I think. So a little about myself and how I ended up making Morse keys. My name's Phil, as you know. I'm 84 years old. I was born in March 1939 in the fair city of Bradford, which is situated in West Yorkshire. At that time, Bradford was the centre of the woolen and textile trade in the UK. That, of course, is long, long gone. I first became interested in radio aged about 11 when I borrowed, I'm pretty sure it was the Boys' Book of Radio from the local library. After the successful build of a crystal set, I was completely hooked. And I think I renewed that book for a couple of years because after the crystal set, I embarked on the valve project. It was a modular design. It could start as a one valve design and could be expanded to a 4-valve system. Mine never got past the 2-valve stage. Money was rather tight and components were relatively expensive then. I can remember that the valve was a DF33 and the potentiometer with its double pole switch cost me 5 shillings and sixpence, which is tens of pounds now. I got the high tension and low tension batteries as a Christmas present. And early one Christmas morning, the set burst into life. Well, I was fascinated, especially with the short wave bands, the shipping traffic, the tinkling of the teletype signals, and the mysterious dots and dashes of Morse code. Teenage years took over then, I suppose, those wild, rebellious years when our priority is turning our parents' hair grey. And of course, I entered the world of work. I was apprenticed as a fitter and turner at a local firm called English Electric. Their main product there was electric motors, but they're better known internationally for the English Electric Lightning, I think, which was a fighter jet, which essentially consisted of a pilot sitting on top of 2 jet engines. It was very fast, and I could have believed break the sound barrier in a vertical climb. I quite enjoyed the training and the work, but I was still fascinated with the world of electricity, especially those components which, when hooked together, could pluck these mysterious signals from the air. So I did some research, and apart from going to work for the local radio repairman, it appeared that the only place to get training in this relatively new field was with the military. I didn't even consider the army. Too much modern exercise as far as I could see. So it was between the RAF and the RN. So I opted for the Navy, and I'm pretty sure it was the best choice. I applied and they accepted. Like most military organizations, they're well used to young men who already know everything, and they rapidly instilled a sense of discipline and comradeship with their square bashing, marching and shooting. At that time, the world of electronics was expanded almost exponentially in the Navy. It was finding use in just about every aspect of naval hardware. The Navy was desperately short of skilled electronic technicians and were offering early promotion and extra training to anyone who showed any potential. So after a year's basic training and my first ship, which was 2.5 years on an aircraft carrier, most of it out the Far East, I was promoted and given another 2.5 years training and promoted again to petty officer. Ships, of course, then followed. After my experience on the carrier, I decided that I wasn't a big ship man, and I spent the rest of my career on various frigates and destroyers. The last ship I served on was considered state of the art at the time, with gas turbine engines and computer control weapon systems. Throughout this period, one did short courses to keep up to date with the new equipments, and I was introduced to the world of computing with a long course on the first naval computer. It was as big as a house, had 32K of core store, and it took 20 minutes to load the program from a three reels of paper tape. How times change. Unfortunately, on my last vessel, I had an accident which damaged my pelvis and I needed surgery and a hip replacement. So that was the end of my naval career. So now I had to find myself further work. I could have gone to work for one of the many defense contractors who were around, which was fairly standard practice for someone in my position. But most of them were based in and around London, and it was an area I did not fancy. I spotted an advert in a national newspaper for nuclear physicists to work in the nuclear power industry. So I sent them my CV, and they offered me a job as an instrument engineer, which I accepted. It was a very good professional organization, although, what could one say, a little staid in its outlook. They preferred, quite rightly probably, tried and tested solutions to problems and were very much in the analog world. Relay logic still reigned supreme. The favorite saying they had was that a computer was a solution looking for a problem. However, times were beginning to change, and having a little experience in that field, I did a lot of work on microcontrollers, instrumentation, especially heat transfer instrumentation. My highlight, however, was to design, build, and operate a small robotic machine designed to extract a gold watch, which had been accidentally dropped into a reactor. It was a great success. The only disappointment was I didn't get to keep the gold watch. If I'd stayed in the Navy, I would have retired at age 55 with a full pension, and it had been my ambition to do the same in Civvy Street. I couldn't quite make that, but at age 57, I called it a day and retired from working for other people. So what was I going to do now? I hadn't really made any plans. And initially there was plenty of decorating and garden reorganization to be done. But once this was complete, I fulfilled a long-standing ambition and bought myself a lathe. I bought one of those Chinese manufactured machines, and in retrospect, I wish I'd bought a higher quality British lathe. But to be fair, the Chinese machine is still capable of pretty good work after 25 odd years. And I've carried out quite a few modifications to improve its ease of use. So what was I going to make? Well, initially I started with the toy stationary steam engines, which I enjoyed making, and I'd certainly enjoyed them as a child, but it rapidly became clear that modern youth really wasn't that interested if a toy didn't have a screen and several buttons to push. Now, I'd previously bought a couple of Morse keys from Gordon Crowhurst, G4's ZBY, who made keys. He's now a silent key, sadly. And I thought, why not try that? But I didn't want to tread on Gordon's toes, so I hit upon the idea of making reproduction of some old keys. And I started my research with a book written by a lady called Lou Moreau, which I've now mislaid, but I think it was called The Story of the Key. And I made two keys from this book. Photo one, please, Michael. The first key was the signal electric key. I made two of these keys into telegraph stations, equipped with audio AF oscillators and a lamp, and gave them to grandchildren with a very long length of cable and a copy of the Morse code. It was fairly well received, actually, and well used, but to date it hadn't produced any more hams. Photo two, please, Michael. The second key that I built was the C plum key. I was attracted to this key because of its round base. It's the only key that I've ever seen with a round base. Both these keys had no dimensional references at all, so the sizes ended up with my best guess. Photos 3 to 5, please. Bob, my next key was the British Post Office key, which is a a fairly boring key. It's no great beauty, but it was a good exercise and it kept me occupied. I then took an interest in Marconi's keys, and I found some photographs of what I thought was the Titanic key. I'd realized my mistake later. The size of the base was given, so I had a dimensional reference, and I proceeded to make a drawing of the key from photographs. It's actually quite difficult and time-consuming to make a drawing from photographs. You've got to estimate angles and take into account the perspective of the photographs. I decided the key had been made in imperial units, and whatever measurement I came up with, I rounded down to the nearest 16th. Photo 6, please, Michael. Here's a photograph here. I'm afraid it's the only photograph I have. It's not very good, but you can see that I faithfully copied the incorrect knob which was fitted to the key. Medical matters took over next for a while as I needed a further hip replacement. It all went well, but I was banned from the workshop for a few weeks. And it was during this time, while surfing the internet, that I came across the website eBay. As the shelves were straining a little under the weight of steam engines and Morse keys, I never made one of anything. It was always at least 5 off. So I thought, why not give it a try? So the post office keys all sold and they covered their cost. However, the Marconi copies were very popular, commanded a high price, and had many requests for more. So I decided to do things properly and contacted the Marconi archive, which at that time was situated in Chelmsford on the site of Marconi's original factory. It's now occupied by British Aerospace. So I was now able to examine and measure the real Titanic key, popularly known as the guillotine key and also known as the side lever key. I was able to correct the measurements I'd taken for the key, which I'd derived from photographs. And I was also introduced to another key, unknown to me at the time, which was the grasshopper. So it was a very successful day out, and I spent the next couple of weeks translating my notes into detailed drawings of the keys. I then began production of the guillotines in earnest. Photos 7 to 9, please, Michael. There's some debate about the use of the side lever. Some people maintain that it should an arc develop at the contacts, the side levers open to break the circuit, whilst others claim that it should an arc develop, the levers closed, shorting out the contacts and quenching the arc. As the key can be wide in either mode, either explanation could be right, but there are photographs of radio rooms where the lever can be seen to be held open with the string, so I favour the latter explanation. The auxiliary contacts on the key are operated by an eccentric rod which is attached to the lever, and they're used for receiver protection. Over the next couple of years, I interspersed the production of this key with 2 other keys, photos 10 to 12, the maritime key, which was the original key I'd made, and originally mistaken it for the Titanic key, and now I could reproduce it accurately. And here the auxiliary contacts are to the front of the key. The other key, photo 13 to 15, was the oil brake key. Now this is identical to the maritime key. It's just got an oil bath surrounding the operating contacts to suppress arcing. The bases of all the keys are very similar, a 4-part construction with end cheeks tenoned onto the main section, and either a 1-piece lower base or in some cases a 4-piece mitered skirt. The original wood used for the bases was apparently Spanish mahogany. Now, I don't know what Spanish mahogany is, but I was rather lucky to obtain a large quantity of mahogany from the local bank, which was being upgraded to a nice modern plastic and formica institution. Its big mahogany counters being removed. The original finish on the key would undoubtedly have been French polish or lacquer, but I really found it impossible to achieve a dust-free finish using these methods, so I resorted to a sanding sealer polished with carnauba wax. Now, all these keys included the Marconi maker's label as part of the build. Now, I didn't have the facilities for engraving, so I used an engraver in the local market. And after a couple of batches, I don't know what he was thinking of. The engraver either decided it wasn't worth his while, or he didn't want to do it, and he increased his prices to an absolutely ridiculous level. I had to grin and bear it the first time, as I had keys to deliver, but I was nowhere was I going to pay in future. I looked around for other engravers with no success, so I decided to build my own engraving machine, which I did. Photo 16, please, Michael. Now, it's not very pretty, but it worked. I then looked around for the software to drive it, and I was absolutely horrified at the cost of commercial software. I did consider writing something myself, but luckily before I embarked on this mammoth task, I found a gentleman called Artsoft, a Canadian firm who was just starting out with this CNC software. I think he called it Master 5 back then. I downloaded the trial version, which worked fine. So I paid the license fee, which at that time was fairly cheap, and luckily included free upgrades for life. Now I've been introduced to CNC, I've really begun to realize its potential. The terminal nuts on Marconi keys are decorative curved sides and the tops. And many Victorian instruments were decorative as well as functional. Now I used to manage these with a series of round tool bits and homemade foam tools, but it was really time consuming and the lathe was really underpowered for using foam tools. A CNC lathe would be the answer to all my problems and would produce identical components while I watched. Enter my CNC lathe, photo 17. It's a modified Austrian-built Unimat SL1000 lathe, and it does absolutely sterling work in the production of anything with curves or whatever. It speeded up production quite a lot. It uses NEMA 23 stepper motors and a Xylotex controller, which I obtained when on a visit to the USA. Over a period of about 2.5 years, I produced 50 guillotine keys and 16 each of the maritime and oil grade keys. I varied the wording on the maker's label over the run. Originally, they read G0MVT Telegraph Keys, Penketh, England, but then I changed to an authentic looking label, but with the serial number 978973, which was my service number. And then I added my own label on the underside of the key. Next, photos 18 to 20, please, Mike. Next, I produced some copies of the grasshopper key, so named as its tall knob and angled ebonite switch resemble the insect. I believe this key was the key that was first used in transmission of the first radio signals across the Atlantic, so it has some historical significance. 16 of these keys were made. As with the previous Marconi keys, some parts, especially the standards which hold the axle, were fabricated rather than cut from the solid. The two ears which hold the axle were pilot drilled and then screwed and Loctited to the base, after which the holes were reamed through together to ensure alignment. It's just to save money, actually, because brass is not all that cheap. Next, I was introduced to the semi-automatic keys and invited to make some copies of the WO Coffee Mecograph key. Photos 21 to 25, please, Michael. Now, this was the very first semi-automatic key, and only 2 examples were known to exist. I produced a drawing of the key from photographs with empty dimension boxes and sent them to the owner of a key, who was kind enough to fill in the boxes for me. In order to give some real authenticity to the keys, I was sent some American oak from the USA, which exhibited a tiger striping, which the bases of these keys were noted for. This run of keys almost ended in a bit of a farce, actually. But luckily, I sent some photographs of the key to their prospective owners. Photo 26, please, Michael. And somebody spotted that I'd sneaked an extra H into the word mecograph. So the labels had to be carefully removed, another batch engraved, and the keys finally finished off correctly. The next key was a commission. A gentleman in the UK recently retired, wished to visit schools giving lectures on submarine cable telegraphy. His only problem was that he didn't have a key to demonstrate with. Photos 27 to 29. As I'm sure you know, cable telegraphy is very slow due to the inductance and capacitance on the enormously long cables. So two levers are used on the key, one for the dash element and one for the dots. The elements are now of equal length, but of different polarities. Now, I had been for some time aware of another Marconi key of historical importance. This key had been used during Marconi's experiments carried out from the Haven Hotel in Poole, which is in Dorset. This key, for some reason, is known as Marconi's second key, photos 30 to 32. These experiments involved using tuned circuits within the apparatus to provide some selectivity and resulted in the 4/7 patent of 1900. The key had been housed in the Marconi archive in Chelmsford, but they decided to move it to the Oxford Museum of Science and Industry. This move took over 2 years, so I had quite a wait before I could get the details. It was a fairly straightforward build. The only oddity was the spring, which was a torsion string wound around both sides of the axle and hooked into the side of the lever and the base. So there was no adjustment to it. And next, because I hadn't found my next project and really for a bit of fun, I made some half-size grasshopper keys, photo 33. My next venture was also by request and my second semi-automatic key, or jigger, as our Australian friends call them. A couple of ex-Postmaster General mechanics called John Crossley Robley and Frederick Tuff established a factory in Pearse Street in Perth, Western Australia. Its precise location was in the back room of the Horseshoe Cafe, so I think it might have been a fairly modest affair. However, in the 1920s, they began production of the Piergraph number 2 key, photos 34 to 38, please. This key was unusual in that it was back to front with the pendulum being reversed compared to the standard semi-automatic key such as the Vibraplex. It's not known how many keys were produced, but only one appears to survive, which is located at the Wireless Hill station in Perth. I had some dimensional information from down under, but the bulk of the information came from photographs. So luckily, some of these photographs have been taken in the plan and elevation positions, so it was possible to make reasonably accurate assessments. The key was very fast. Although I'd used a spring the same thickness as the original, it must have been a little stiffer. So I had to make the weight somewhat larger in order to tame the beast a little. But this unfortunately meant they would not pass the dot spring, limiting the range of adjustment slightly. The base in the original was made from a casting, so I machined the base from a billet of cast iron, which with my rather lightweight machinery took around an hour. I'm occasionally asked to make the odd missing part from keys, the odd terminal, shorting lever, and sometimes something a little larger and more interesting. Photo 39. This is the Perry blinker key. I don't know much about it, but I think it's some sort of training set. The lever was completely missing and had been replaced with a brass affair that you can see. The hood for the lamp was also missing. Now the lever was a complex two-part affair, and the only way to make the replacement would be an accurate engineering drawing or to have the lever to hand. The owner managed to borrow an original lever and sent it to me to carry out the work. And as I had now increased my CNC inventory with the addition of a Tague mill, photo 40. So once a drawing was produced, the work could be coded and produced very easily. Photo 41, assembled and bent into shape, photo 42, mounted on the key, 43. The hood for the lamp was made from a suitably sized cigar tube, No, I made the mistake of mounting it the wrong way around. The error was easily corrected. Now, the next restoration I did, although I didn't realize it at the time, was actually going to change my focus quite a lot. It was, of course, photos 44 and 45, a very neglected and beat up Marconi PS213. It was in a very poor state. All the components were corroded and pitted. One of the front terminals was missing. The upper contact screw was incorrect and the thread housing it was stripped. The lock screw for it was missing. The lever, in addition to its corroded state, had chips and gouges from its surface as though it had been clamped in a serrated jaw vise. So I tackled the worst problem first on the basis that if I couldn't fix that, there wasn't really a lot of point in making it look pretty. So I drilled out the damaged thread, photo 46, silver soldered in a filling piece, photo 47, drilled and tapped the new thread, photo 48, and reinstated the slit, photo 49. Now this procedure was successful, so I then manufactured the missing or damaged components, photo 50, which only left the cosmetic work to do. The base, which was a beautiful dark brown color, polished up nicely. The pits and gouges on the metal pot components I filled using repeated copper plating. When copper plating deposits rapidly, and then you can sand it back until all the pits and marks are filled and flush with the original surface. A final light coating of copper was then given to all components, which were then polished, photo 51. I think we're out of. But anyway, the components were then nickel plated and the key reassembled. I've searched high and low, but I'm afraid that I cannot find a photograph of the completed key. Now, there was no doubt which key I was going to reproduce next. I've taken the opportunity, obviously, of having the PS213 to make a detailed drawing of it. So I then proceeded to manufacture a batch of PS213s. Photos 52 to 55, please, Michael. These were faithful copies, with the exception of the tongue, which carries the silver contact. I'd noted on the original key, the tongue appeared to be made from mild steel and was badly bent. So on my reproductions, I made the tongues from spring steel. They were actually made from an old hacksaw blade, and the slight give on contact closure, to my mind, actually improved the feel of the key. And it was well received by the customers of the first batch. Now, I'd long toyed with the idea of designing my own key and always tried out the keys I'd made or restored. The only design decisions I made on this key was that it had to be a long lever and the contact was going to be at the back. When I tried out the PS213, I realized that this really was a key which outperformed all of the keys that I'd tried by an order of magnitude, and that to try and outdesign this was far beyond my talents. But could I improve it? Now, David Ring, N1EA, had asked me to make him a PS213 with an extended base to improve the stability of the key. In commercial operation, the key was often screwed at the bench, so stability wasn't a problem. But an amateur's key is a portable item, so this made sense. I liked my inclusion of the spring steel into the contact closure, but of course, others may not. How springy should it be? Different people would have different tastes. So I decided to design variable springiness into the system. Everything from absolutely solid to as mushy as you want. The lever, I decided, was the heart of the key, so that would remain unchanged. The only changes were going to be to the extended base and the spring-loaded assembly. Now, I originally went into production with 3 initial designs. An original, which was the original PS213, no spring, but with a simplified contact assembly. Photo 56, please, Michael. A short tongue version. Now, this was meant to represent the rugby refurbished keys, where for some reason, the contact assemblies were reversed, thus shortening the tongue. And this version included the variable spring system, photo 57. And finally, a long tongue version, which also included the variable spring system, photo 58. Now, in my opinion, the short tongue version completely ruined the feel of the key. So I rapidly abandoned that version. And it then dawned on me that there wasn't really any point in making the springless version, as the crown nut, which controls the spring pressure, can be screwed fully down, eliminating the effect of the spring. So I decided to concentrate on the one version, which at that time went under the name PB213 SLCLT, which it was a bit of a mouthful. It stood for spring-loaded contact long tongue. In future, I think I'll just call it the PB213. PS213 was actually the Marconi drawing number for the key, and I've just replaced the PS with my initials PB. The first versions of the key used the original Marconi pivoting arrangements and lever. In the original keys, both these items would have been made from casting, which just required machining. In order to replicate the parts, I had to fabricate them, which was quite time consuming. So I judged a simple monoblock pivot would be easier and quicker to make. It would mean losing the trunnions on the side of the lever and altering the weight of the lever. But as I judged this weight was centered around the pivot, it would have minimal effect on the feel of the key. Feedback from users has also caused some changes. I had some comments on the key being a little lightweight. So after much thought, I fitted a slightly thicker lower base and inlaid an 1/8 of an inch piece of mild steel into it. Further feedback from a customer who obviously lived in a hot and humid climate wrote to say how much he liked the key, but he was really disappointed that the steel base had gone rusty. I hadn't thought of that one. So now they all go out with a coat of lacquer on the steel. I've recently given up doing the nickel plating myself. A dusty workshop is not the place to do nickel plating, and I never truthfully fully mastered the art. A local one-man plating business now does a much better job than ever I did. Production continues, although it's slowing down a little. I only work around half a day now as age takes its toll and the afternoon nap becomes a mandatory event. Well, that just about completes my key story, but I'll conclude with a brief tour of the workshop. The workshop started life as a 16-foot by 9-inch single brick garage with an adequate power supply. It had a corrugated asbestos roof, which I replaced with a metal one, and which I lagged. The Chinese lathe was the first machine tool. It was fairly basic, but still capable of accurate work. I've upgraded it with the addition of a quick release tailstock saddle locking lever, tailstock turret, quick change tool post, and a tumbler reversed. The mill drill, again a Chinese machine, came with auto feed, and I upgraded the drill chuck in with an ER25 collet system. You've already met my CNC lathe and Teague mill, but I became so enamored with CNC that I bought a German CNC router, Photo 59. This enabled me to machine multiple bases at once rather than the one at a time I'd been used to on the Teague mill, much increasing productivity. I also bought an additional Teague mill at this time and added a small annex to the workshop in order to house it. It meant sacrificing half my greenhouse, which leant onto the garage, but it also gave me the space for a small workbench. Photo 60. I use one of the Teague mills for the heavy work and keep the other one for the lighter engraving type work. I initially built the control systems for the mills from eBay sourced Chinese stepper drivers. They were cheap, and I soon found out why. Apparently the chipsets they employed had not been implemented correctly. And although they worked okay, they provided a much reduced power output. I used them for a year or so, then replaced them with the American Gecko drives. I've also upgraded both mills, replacing the original American 115 volt 5th horsepower motors with more powerful sewing machine motors, and added speed control and a tachometer. Photo 61. The workshop is too small, overcrowded, often untidy, and rather chaotic. Here are a few shots which will give the overall feel of the place. Photos 62 to 64, please, Michael. I long for a larger shop, but as senior management here says, probably quite accurately, with a bigger place, you would only make a bigger mess. And just to make things worse, I will soon be installing my latest project, a Unimat 3 CNC lathe. Photo 65. Well, that's about it from here, folks. Thank you for listening. And thank you, Michael, for the sterling work on the slide projector. I hope you each found something of interest, and if you have any questions now, I'll be happy to try and answer them.
Phil, I have a comment, and that is I have ordered the PB213 from you, due to be delivered next month, I think, because of some kind of hitch in the process. But I think it's a great key. I haven't experienced using it, but it looks fantastic, and I've read a lot about it and about you as well and your abilities. I want to thank you for being here and doing that, and also for the talk you're giving here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for those comments. They're out for nickel plating, and everything else is ready. Once the nickel plating, it's just assembly. There was a problem at the nickel platers with this degreasing tank had become contaminated somehow, and all the parts had to be repolished again, which was quite laborious, but they're out again, so I'm hoping they'll be back perhaps next week, and later this month I think we'll might be able to get them out.
All right, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Encourage folks to come forward with their questions. If you'd like, you can also take questions in the chat. Phil, among other things, I'm impressed by the range of skills that go into a key: historian, motion control, microprocessors, wood and metal working, public relations, very, very broad set of skills. Other questions?
Mike, I think, had one there. Jump in, Mike.
I just want to say that my daughter learned CW on your key, Phil. This is staying with me forever. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm also curious. I'm going to go to the view everybody view. Would all of us with PB213 keys wave a hand? There are a bunch of them out here.
Yeah, can I pass a comment, Bob?
Please.
I've been lucky enough to own one of Phil's keys for about 4 or 5 months now. I actually went over and met Phil because he only lives about 8 miles away. He wasn't very well when I met him, but it's one of the, well, it's probably the best straight key I've ever owned, without a shadow of a doubt.
Oh, it's very kind of you to say so. I remember it well. I had to get out of bed and I went straight back after we'd met. And you wanted to pay for the postage, you had to give it back.
Phil, forgive me. I missed the first 3 minutes of the presentation, and you might have said this, but what did you do for a living? Or were you always a machinist, and were you always making keys? I was just wondering how you developed the skills for all of this.
No, I originally started out as a machinist. I was going to be trained as a fitter and turner. But electronics was my true love, so I joined the military, the Navy, and I spent my life fixing radars, weapons control systems, you name it. And then when I retired, I went to work in the nuclear industry as an instrument engineer. Again, a lot of microprocessor work, and it's only since I retired that I reverted back to my tools, really. And it's taken me a long time to acquire the skills. I've been doing it 20 years now, and it's a funny thing. You do the same things and it doesn't work. Then all of a sudden it works when you've acquired this skill. I'm still trying. I'm nearly there to acquire the skill to polish acetol quickly and easily, and it's very difficult. It's
Phil, are you on the air and are you doing CW often?
Not as often as I'd like, and I'm not as good as I like. I missed a good opportunity in the Navy because they'd have taught me. I knew the code. It still fascinated me, and I could send, but I was too busy, I suppose, and to learn it. They would often let me, the Sparkers, they had a system that let me knock off a frequency. They used to have a technique, if you were going to send a signal, you'd use teletype, obviously, and GYA, which was Whitehall, would be broadcasting in Morse code all the frequencies that are available. And the ship that wished to send a signal in would just invent a call sign and call them Morse code. And they'd let me do that. And you'd listen. And if that frequency disappeared, you knew you'd got them. So then you sent the plain language teletype signal, and then they'd respond to that. And then you sent your encrypted. But they'd let me knock off the frequency, as they used to call it. But I didn't, until I'd left the Navy and retired, I took up amateur radio, but I've left it too late to learn Morse code, I think, properly. I'm reasonably competent, about 15 to 18 words a minute. You can send it faster, of course, but that's no good because they send it back faster.
I got an idea for you, Phil. How would you like a lifetime honorary to this club, and then you can practice with us?
Well, I've joined actually, and it's just getting the time because it obviously works. And I've practiced with, with these computer simulators, and you think you're good, but I think there's nothing like real life practice, is there?
No, it's the best thing.
Phil, I noticed that Emma has a question. Emma?
Yes. I got a key at a garage sale a number of years ago. I think I paid $2 for it, American, and somebody told me that it's a World War II key put on a cheap piece of wood, and I'm wanting to clean it up and put it on a nice stained piece of wood. Can you tell me what type of wood you use?
Well, I use mahogany, and I've still got a good supply of it. But any, I think you need to go for a hardwood, and in fact, American oak, if you can get it, I think it's quite plentiful. It's fairly hard, but it's got nice patterned graining. Once you've stained it and polished it, it looks very attractive.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say oak. It looks very nice.
And how would I know whether this key is actually from World War II or not?
Well, without I have no idea. Is it an American key?
I have no idea. I just got it at a garage sale, and I've got it right here.
Is that not a J38?
Pardon me?
I'm no expert on these, but I think pretty sure that's an American key. Although the Japanese did one very similar.
Yeah, I think that's a. Does it have where the shaft goes into the side trunnions? Does it have little pockets with ball bearings in it?
No.
It doesn't. Okay, because that looked like the Japanese replication of the J38.
Right.
Looks like. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for your information.
Yeah.
Pleasure.
You can always contact Tom W1TP, who's probably one of the best experts on keys, and Tom could immediately tell you what that is.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'll mention just briefly, we have Wild About Bugs, Keys and Sounders. We're working on the name. That would be 5 o'clock on Tuesday, Zoom A. It's a good place to bring your interesting telegraphy instruments and get some comments. Tom is frequently there with us. Are there other questions?
Yes, I have a question, if I may.
Please, and then Malk.
Firstly, can I just say I really enjoyed your presentation, Phil. Very good indeed. So thank you for that.
Oh,
Can I ask, how long does it take to make a key? And I'm assuming you make in batches. So how does that sort of thing work?
I knew somebody would ask this, and I don't know. Yeah, I make them in batches. I make them in batches of 12 now. I think I started with 5, then went to 6, 10. It's really difficult to say, but I generally make 4 or 5 batches a year. So that's 48. Let's say 40. Let's say 50. So a week. It takes me a week to make a key.
Okay, Phil. And what's the delivery time on one of your keys at the moment? I guess it varies depending on demand.
Well, the current batch are all sold, and I expect to complete another batch August, September, being the holiday time and this sort of thing.
Okay, good stuff. I'll have to get my order in soon then, Phil. Many thanks. Cheers.
Phil, would you confirm that I have a place in the current batch? I believe so.
I haven't got I'm sure you have.
Okay, so I've been taking a slot in each batch for a while.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah, Bob. Sorry.
So if you drop your name into the chat, I'll draw out of those names one at random, and that will be the current batch.
Right.
There you go. That's why you wanted to show up today, among other things. Drop your name in the chat, email, let me know, and I'll find one. Random draw.
So is there a website, or how do we look at the catalog?
There is a website. I forget what I've called it. G0MBT Telegraph Keys, I think. Or Classic Keys, is it? I should know, shouldn't I?
And I'll drop that in the chat as well.
If you Google G0MBT, the website will come up. Oh, there it is. Well done, Michael.
Yeah, so Phil, this is Mark. And I just wanted to tell you, I acquired one of your keys. I think it was November or December, so just recently. And I would tell you, it is a beautiful key. I really enjoy it. It sits on my desk here when it's not in the ham shack. I actually move it from place to place, but most of the time it sits down here on my work desk, and the number of people that comment on it is quite significant. So I wanted to tell you, I really appreciate it. It's a beautiful key, and it keys beautifully as well. So I would say anybody that's looking for one, get on the list.
Thank you, Mark. It's nice to hear.
And Phil, just wanted to let you know, you now have an honorary lifetime membership in the club. More classes than you will ever have time to attend, and you're welcome to all of them.
Thank you very much, Bob.
Yeah, if I can just ask Phil, it's probably a long shot, but have you any designs on designing something radically different, Phil, or are you happy with just carrying on with what you're making?
No, that's exactly where I am now. I'm just going to make this one until it stops. I often get people wanting to make guillotine keys, you know, the Marconi keys, but I'm afraid I turned them down. I have a garden to look after, holidays to take, and it's still interesting. I'm still getting better at this. I don't work as often now, but productivity's gone up. So I can still keep about the same output, which is probably 50 or 60 a year. And that's enough. So I'm afraid I have no other ideas of making anything different. I would have, if I hadn't have gone down this route, I think some of the Swedish keys I would have liked to make copies of.
You need a young apprentice, Phil.
I'm not sure I could deal with the youth of today. Well, I could, but I'd be accused of bullying.
Yeah. Any further questions?
No question here, Bob. Fantastic presentation. Really enjoyed it. I've got a number of the British Post Office telegraph instruments sitting on display at home, and I always love they have a certain aesthetic beauty to them that's kind of lacking in some of the American instruments that are very utilitarian. And really enjoyed the presentation. Thank you for your time.
Oh, my pleasure. It's my first.
And while we've got everybody on screen, Phil, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for inviting me, Bob.
Really, really happy that you're able to join us. Look forward to seeing you again in the classes. Michael, if you would stop the recording, please.
No problems.